Hey guys, Joel Bridewell here. Welcome to this Old Testament survey as we're making our way through the Post-exilic writings. And we come to Daniel. So Daniel's name means God is my judge. And its place in the canon in Hebrew is among the writings, not a prophet, but in English it's from the Septuagint and listed among the prophets. The date is about 538 or 537 BC during the Babylonian captivity and their defeat by Cyrus. The author is probably Daniel, or at least a close associate. The purpose is to proclaim both the defeat and the judgment of the Gentile world powers, as well as the hope and deliverance for God's people Israel. The style is written in the first and the third person, and the composition includes historical section in the first 6 chapters, 6 stories about loyalty to Yahweh. The final 6 chapters are prophetic section with 4 visions about empires in Yahweh's control. Half the book is written in Hebrew, chapter 1 verse 1 through chapter 2 verse 4a, and chapter 8 verse 1 through chapter 12:13, where hope and deliverance for Yahweh's people is stressed. And then sort of the middle half of the book, chapter 2 verse 4b through the end of chapter 7, is judgment and destruction of unbelievers. One question comes up is, who was Daniel? He was a member of a family of nobility. He served in Babylon from his late teenage years to his upper 80s in terms of age. He had a considerable amount of influence with his 3 friends, all taken due to their great minds, taken from Jerusalem over into Babylonia. So when we look at the book, the first 6 chapters are the experiences of Daniel and his friends. Chapter 1 is Daniel and his friends in Nebuchadnezzar's court. Talking about Nebuchadnezzar's invasion, the first couple of verses. In verses 3 through 7 says Daniel and his 3 friends were chosen to be taken to Babylon to be trained. And verses 8 through 16 is Daniel and his 3 friends decide to remain loyal to Yahweh. In verses 17 through 21, Daniel and his 3 friends' exaltation. They rejoice because they go on a special diet, a vegetable diet, and God makes them healthier than those that were not on the king's diet. In chapter 2, there's Nebuchadnezzar's dream and its interpretation, with the dream taking up the first 13 verses. And the revelation made to and through Daniel in verses 14 through 24. In verses 25 through 45, Daniel's ready to go before the king and interpret the dream, knowing what it's all about. And the result in verses 46 through 49 is that Daniel's elevated, and he elevates his 3 friends. Of course, you can go back and read it, but you know about the statue and the head of gold, and then it goes silver, and all the other materials it's used, and how they represent different empires, from the Babylonians to the Medo-Persians, and the division's going to happen there, eventually down to Greece and down to Rome. And then this rock that comes, a stone that comes from heaven and breaks over, and it's a permanent one. That's the coming of Christ. Chapter 3 is contending against false worship. There's a large image erected, and Daniel's 3 friends refuse to bow down or worship. Now, Daniel's probably in another part of the empire at this point, which is probably why he's not mentioned. The furnace winds up being heated 7 times more than usual in verses 19 through 23, and even those who try to take them in are burned alive. Verses 24 through 30, there's a miraculous deliverance of Daniel's 3 friends. And Nebuchadnezzar even notes that one, like the son of the gods, which is a reference that the Babylonians would have used, which we would interpret as the son of God, is there with them. And none of them are touched in the least. They're unbound, though they went in bound. And Nebuchadnezzar is amazed and impressed at their Lord for delivering them. So he acknowledges God in chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. The rest of chapter 4 is lessons in humility for Nebuchadnezzar. He had another dream, and Daniel interprets that dream, but also talks to them about how he's going to be humiliated and embarrassed, and how he's going to become more like an animal, eating grass and so forth, and he's going to have claws, and his hair is going to grow long. And that's exactly what happens by the end of chapter 4, and he comes to his right mind and begins to praise the one true and living God. In chapter 5, we find out about Babylon's fall. The year is 539 BC. It's 23 years after Nebuchadnezzar's death in 562 BC. And we see in those first few verses the feast and the writing, the handwriting on the wall. And no interpretation can be found for the writing. What does this mean? And so the queen enters and mentions Daniel, this one who's in the empire, who has wisdom and is able to interpret dreams. And so Daniel is called. He's about 81 years old at this point. And he gives a quick history lesson, telling them this is about how God had dealt with Babylon, how he had dealt with Nebuchadnezzar, and how Nebuchadnezzar had responded. He spoke of Nebuchadnezzar's pride, and the interpretation then is given, and it talks about how his kingdom has been found wanting. This is Belteshazzar, and his kingdom is found wanting, and he's going to be judged. He's actually going to be judged that night. He's going to be overthrown. And so, because of this, Daniel's put third in command because of his great wisdom, but Belshazzar is killed the next day, October 13th, 536, as Darius the Mede came in overnight. As we know from history that they rerouted part of the Euphrates River, so the river level would lower, that went under the wall, and they could enter in under the wall while everyone's partying. The Medo-Persian Empire came in. It's possibly that Darius is also known as Cyrus. There's a debate there as to whether that's the one and the same, but they come in and the Medo-Persian Empire takes over. In chapter 6, with the Medo-Persian Empire in place, we see Daniel's deliverance from the den of lions. With this plot against Daniel planned by the satraps, and they're the tax collectors, and they plan against Daniel being a Jew who's faithful, and he's going to pray to the one true and living God, Yahweh. So he refused to obey the new law and continue to pray to his God, and so because they got the king to sign off, they place him in the den of lions, and yet none of these lions attack him. He's delivered, and the next morning he acknowledges that the Lord protected him and shut the mouths of the lions. It wasn't that the lions weren't hungry, because as soon as he's released, they throw his accusers in there and they get torn to shreds. So they recognize the living God as the one true God. Chapter 7 through 12 are the visions of Daniel. With the visions of the four beasts in chapter 7, there's the world powers. It's the first year of Belshazzar in 553 BC, and the interpretation of the visions is a lion with eagle's wings, which represents Babylon and its swiftness. The bear with 3 ribs in the mouth is the Medo-Persian conquering 3 others. The leopard with 4 heads is the Greece that's divided into 4 parts, and the beast with 10 horns is Rome and the complete world power, with the little horn being intended as the Antichrist. The vision of the 5th kingdom in verses 9 through 22 of chapter 7 is the Messianic kingdom. And the vision of the 4th and 5th kingdoms are explained of what's going to happen with eventually the Antichrist of Rome coming into place and the Messiah. Chapter 8 is the vision of the ram and the goat. It's the Medo-Persian Empire. It's the rise of Antiochus Epiphanes, which is a type of Antichrist. It starts off with the rise of a ram with 2 horns. This vision came in 551 BC. It's the overthrow of the ram by a goat with 1 horn that's broken and succeeded by 4 others in verses 5 through 8. And the rise of the little horn in verses 9 through 14. And the interpretation of this vision is that Angel Gabriel comes to interpret the vision, and the ram with 2 horns is the kingdom of Media and Persia. And the goat is the kingdom of Greece. And the power will rise from 4 kingdoms, with the broken horn being Alexander the Great. And when he was told of this, when he was conquering later on, that he was mentioned in Scripture, the Jewish Scriptures, he looked at it and he spared Jerusalem because of that. He was impressed. The 4 kingdoms are the 4 generals after Alexander's death, and the king to rise was Antiochus Epiphanes. In chapter 9 is a vision of 70 weeks with Daniel praying for his people. The vision of Gabriel to Daniel in verses 20 through 27 shows that Gabriel prepares to interpret, and the Messiah's first coming in verses 24 through 27. The purpose is to come to give atonement for sin. And so the timing is either the first or second coming of Christ. The time frame could be the first year of Cyrus is 536 BC, and the 3rd year of Darius the First is 518 BC. The 7th year of Artaxerxes the First is 457 BC, and the 20th year of him is 445 BC. The 3rd day could refer to the first coming of Christ by adding 483 years, which is 69 weeks of 7 years. Making it 483 added becomes 457 BC to arrive around AD 27. So that's the beginning of Jesus' ministry. The results is that it points to the end of time. The cutting off the Messiah and the destruction of the city and the sanctuary and the desolations which will extend to the end are spoken there at the end of chapter 9. And then chapters 10 through 12 is the vision of a great war. With Daniel strengthened to receive the truth of the overwhelming vision in chapter 10, he's terrified of the vision, but then he's comforted. There's conflict to come in chapter 11 with another view of the overflowing of Persia and the division of Greece, and the final 7 years of the Gentile era, the tribulation in verses 36 through 45. In chapter 12 is the time of the end with the great tribulation and Israel's deliverance, where Michael, one of the archangels, fights for Israel. There's going to be resurrection in verses 2 and 3. Verse 4, many will look for answers everywhere, and the Antichrist's failure to win over God in the final 3.5 years is discussed in verses 5 through 13. So now there's a great history that's true that we find out about in the first 6 chapters, but the great prophecy, much of which has been fulfilled, except for the things pertaining to the Great Tribulation. And so Daniel's got a great message for us that we can learn from, we can trust because it's rooted in history, and the prophecy that's been that has come to pass has been true. And so it's a trustworthy message that we can learn from today as we prepare for our future.